Hello, dear readers. Welcome to an extraordinary journey through time, where the aroma of Arizona's red earth mixes with the perfume of Californian vineyards. Today, I'll tell you a story that beats like the heart of a determined woman, the story of Catherine Sullivan, a young woman who dared to defy the invisible chains that imprisoned her in 1883. Between the hot stones of the desert and the golden fields of hope, you'll discover that sometimes you must climb onto the horse of courage to ride toward freedom. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? What place in the world brought you to this story? I love getting to know you, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave that loving like. It helps me so much to continue bringing these narratives that warm the heart. Now take a deep breath and come with me. Year 1883, Arizona Territory, Golden Eagle Ranch. The sun descended like spilled blood over the arid lands of the Arizona Territory, tinting red the distant mountains and the cacti that grew like silent sentinels. Catherine Sullivan adjusted the ribbon that held her brown hair, feeling the familiar weight of loneliness that inhabited the Golden Eagle Ranch like an invisible ghost. At 19, Kate carried on her delicate shoulders the burden of being the only daughter of Colonel Thaddeus Sullivan, a man whose graying mustache hid a heart hardened by the battles of the Civil War and the relentless sun of the West. The ranch stretched for miles of dry land, where cattle grazed among thorny bushes and dust danced eternally in the hot air. Kate's hands, once soft as rose petals, now knew the rough texture of rustic cotton and the weight of domestic tasks that occupied her days. Since the death of her mother Mary 5 years before, an Irish woman with crystalline laughter who succumbed to cholera, the ranch's main house had transformed into a cathedral of heavy silences and gazes that never met. Colonel Sullivan, a veteran who had brought from the South the traditions of a society in ruins, insisted that Kate remain a lady, even in those lands where elegance was a luxury few could sustain. Cotton dresses, always long, always buttoned to the neck, were her daily prison. Her feet, confined in leather boots that her mother had chosen in happier times, yearned to feel the red earth between her toes. That April afternoon, while embroidering by the window that faced the central patio, Kate watched the cowboys return from the pasture. Their free movements, the carefree way they rode, awakened in her an envy that grew like weeds in her chest. What would it be like to feel the wind in loose hair? What flavor would freedom have? The sound of heavy boots echoed in the wooden corridor, announcing the colonel's arrival. Kate straightened her shoulders, preparing for another night of superficial conversations about weather, cattle, and neighboring properties. But something in her father's expression when he entered the room made her heart accelerate. "Catherine," he said, his voice carrying a tone she couldn't decipher, "we need to talk." What secrets would those grey eyes hide that once were blue as the sky, before war and widowhood had faded them? The following Monday dawned with a sky laden with clouds that promised rain, but which, like so many other promises in those lands, dissolved before being fulfilled. Kate had awakened with a tight stomach, the conversation with her father echoing in her ears like a nightmare that refused to leave. "In 5 days you will marry Cornelius Blackwood," the colonel had announced, the words falling between them like stones in a calm pond, creating waves that spread infinitely. Cornelius Blackwood. Kate knew the name, whispered by the cowboys with a mixture of respect and fear. At 45, the owner of the region's largest mining operation was a man with large hands and small eyes, who looked at her during Sunday masses like someone evaluating the quality of a horse. A former Confederate soldier, he carried on his back the reputation of exploiting Mexican and Chinese workers as if they were less than human. Blackwood's first wife, Abigail, had died 2 years before in a carriage accident that no one questioned, but about which everyone whispered. Kate remembered the woman, thin, always silent, with eyes that seemed to apologize for existing. "Father," she had tried to argue, her voice coming out tremulous like a child's. "I don't know him. I don't." "Love is a luxury for the rich, Catherine." The colonel cut her off, turning the whiskey glass between his calloused fingers. "Blackwood wants our lands to expand the mining. We need his capital to survive the drought." Her father's words now echoed through the empty house as Kate walked through the rooms like a lost soul. With each step, she felt more distant from herself, as if she were watching another person's life through a fogged window. The 5 days would pass too quickly, carrying her toward a destiny she hadn't chosen. In the kitchen, Maria, the Mexican housekeeper who had cared for the house since before Kate's birth, prepared tortillas with mechanical movements. Her dark eyes met Kate's, and in them was a silent understanding that dispensed with words. "Miss Kate," Maria murmured in her Spanish mixed with English, "sometimes destiny gives us choices we don't expect." Kate nodded, without fully understanding, but feeling that those words carried more weight than they appeared to. Would it be possible that destiny still held surprises for her, or was she fated to repeat the silent life of Abigail Blackwood? Friday's dawn arrived, wrapped in a darkness that seemed denser than the previous ones, as if even the moon conspired against Kate's plans. The wind howled through the cracks in the house, carrying with it the promise of a sandstorm approaching from the distant mountains. With trembling hands, Kate opened the small cedar box that had belonged to her mother, where she kept the only memories that remained of Mary Sullivan, a rosary of wooden beads, a faded photograph of her homeland in Ireland, and $50 in gold that her mother had hidden for difficult times. Those times had arrived. She put on her simplest blue cotton dress, tied a scarf over her hair, and hid the gold in a small bag that she fastened to her waist. The rudimentary map she had drawn from memory, based on conversations she had heard among the cowboys, showed the path to Tucson. Follow the dry creek for 3 miles, then take the trail that wound between the gorges. The stable exhaled the familiar odor of hay and leather, mixed with the sweat of horses sleeping restlessly. Kate chose Estrella, a gentle bay mare she used to ride on the rare occasions when her father allowed it. Her fingers trembled as she tightened the saddle, each movement seeming amplified in the dawn's quietude. When she finally galloped away from the ranch, her heart beat so hard she feared awakening the entire territory. The first miles passed in a blur of bushes and stones, the cold morning air cutting her face like invisible razors, but it was upon spotting the distant lights of a cavalcade that she understood. She had been discovered. "There! It's her!" shouted a voice Kate recognized as Jake Morrison's, her father's chief foreman. The sandstorm hit her like a solid wall, transforming the world into a red mist that scratched her eyes and suffocated her lungs. Estrella stumbled on an invisible stone, throwing Kate to the ground with violence. The pain that shot through her right shoulder was overshadowed by the terror of hearing hooves approaching. She stumbled among the cacti, her bare feet. She had lost her boots in the fall, bleeding on the sharp stones. Thirst burned her throat. The torn dress offered little protection against the thorns that tore her skin like invisible claws. It was when her strength finally abandoned her, when she let herself fall among the red rocks expecting the worst, that a paint horse emerged from the storm like an apparition. Who would be the rider emerging from the shadows when all hope seemed lost? The paint horse that emerged from the sandstorm had brown and white patches that danced like shadows in the reddish penumbra. Its rider was tall, with broad shoulders that curved slightly forward, like someone carrying the weight of many battles. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that hid part of his face, but Kate could see a scar that cut across his left eyebrow. A Confederate bullet mark, she immediately thought. "Climb up here, miss," he said, his voice deep but gentle, extending a calloused hand. Kate hesitated for an instant that seemed eternal. Accepting help from a stranger in the wild territory of Arizona could mean trading one prison for another, even worse. But the sound of Morrison's hooves approaching cut her doubts like a sharp saber. When their hands met, she felt the contained strength of those fingers that lifted her to the saddle, as if she weighed no more than a feather. The warmth radiating from the masculine body contrasted with the coldness of the night wind, creating a cocoon of security that Kate hadn't experienced in years. "Samuel Mackenzie," he introduced himself when they were already riding toward a dark canyon. "But you can call me Sam." The name rolled across Kate's tongue like wild honey. Sam. Simple, honest, without the pomp and solemnity that surrounded the men she knew. At 26, Sam carried in his blue eyes a maturity that spoke of difficult experiences, but also of a kindness that had resisted them all. "Catherine Sullivan," she responded, surprised by her own courage in using her full name instead of the childish diminutive her father insisted on using. "I know who you are," Sam said, guiding the horse along a narrow trail between high rocks. "The entire territory knows Colonel Sullivan's daughter." There was something in his tone that suggested more than casual knowledge. Kate dared to ask, "How so?" "I worked at the Three Rivers Ranch. I met your mother a few times at Christmas masses. She was special." The mention of her mother made Kate's heart squeeze painfully. Mary Sullivan had truly been special, the only person who understood her, who saw beyond the obedient daughter the colonel tried to mold. "Where are we going?" she asked, when the canyon opened into a small clearing where a half-ruined adobe construction stood. "The old San Miguel mission," Sam explained, helping her dismount. "Abandoned 10 years ago. No one comes here." The mission, even in ruins, maintained an austere dignity that spoke of whispered prayers and silent faith. The thick adobe walls still held the day's coolness, and Kate could see remnants of religious frescoes faded by time. But what secrets would this man hold, who had appeared like a guardian angel in a land where even angels seemed afraid to tread? The San Miguel mission awakened with the first ray of sun filtering through the glassless windows, creating patterns of light and shadow on the adobe walls that whispered stories of 3 centuries. Kate had slept on a blanket Sam had improvised near the abandoned altar, and upon waking, found him already awake, feeding a small fire where coffee boiled in an iron kettle. "Good morning," he said, offering her a metal cup that exhaled aromatic steam. Kate accepted the drink gratefully, feeling the hot liquid travel down her parched throat. For the first time in years, no one had told her what to wear, how to sit, what expression to maintain on her face. Freedom had the bitter and comforting taste of strong coffee. "You said you worked at 3 Rivers. Kate dared to break the silence that stretched comfortably between them. Sam nodded, stirring the coals with a dry branch. The scar on his eyebrow seemed to pulse in the golden morning light. "Former Union cavalry sergeant," he said, his voice carrying a weight that spoke of painful memories. "After the war, I went to 3 Rivers. 8 years caring for cattle, breaking horses, learning that peace is more difficult than war. Why did you stop?" Sam's blue eyes met hers, and Kate saw there a deep sadness mixed with something that seemed like wounded pride. "I protected some Mexican workers who were being mistreated by the owner's son. Apparently defending the weak is insubordination when you're just an employee." The sincerity in those words touched something inside Kate that she didn't know existed. Here was a man who had paid dearly for doing what he considered right, without caring about the consequences. In the weeks that followed, for it was necessary to wait for Morrison's pursuit to cool, Kate discovered facets of herself she had never imagined possessing. Sam taught her to shoot with the Winchester rifle he carried, and his hands guided hers to find the perfect balance between aim and breathing. "The rifle is not a tool of violence in the right hands," he explained to her. "It's an instrument of protection, of survival." He also taught her to recognize edible plants in the desert, to find water following the flight of birds, to read the stars as a night map. And Kate, in turn, cared for the wounds he carried from a life of hard work, using the basic medical knowledge her mother had taught her. It was during one of these care sessions, when Kate was cleaning a deep cut on Sam's hand, that he told her about the medical knowledge he had learned in the war. "When you see men dying for lack of simple care, you learn quickly," he murmured. "I learned that hands can heal as much as they can hurt." One afternoon, exploring the mission ruins, Kate discovered a small silver vein that glittered in the back wall. Sam examined the discovery with interest, but without greed. "Good land," he said simply. "Maybe someday someone can build something beautiful here. Would it be possible for that temporary refuge to transform into something permanent? Or would the past of both inevitably catch up with them?" July arrived in the desert like an open furnace, bringing with it news that traveled the trails like dust carried by wind. Apache attacks in the region had forced the army to intensify patrols, and with them came rumors about a young woman missing from the Golden Eagle Ranch. Kate and Sam had established a delicate routine at the mission. He would leave at dawn to hunt or seek supplies in nearby small towns, always returning before sunset, with stories from the outside world and small gifts, a bone comb, perfumed soap, once even a poetry book he had found in a used store. "Robert Frost," he said, handing her the volume bound in worn leather. "I thought you'd like it." Kate leafed through the yellowed pages, feeling the perfume of old paper mixed with the aroma of sage that permeated everything in the mission. How long had it been since she touched a book? At her father's ranch, reading was viewed with suspicion, as an activity that could fill women's heads with inconvenient ideas. It was during one of those afternoons of shared reading, she read aloud while he repaired harnesses, that they heard the sound of approaching hooves. 4 riders emerged from the canyon, led by Jake Morrison, whose sunburned face expressed implacable determination. "I know you're there, Miss Catherine," Morrison shouted. "Your father promised $50 to whoever brings you back." But there was something different in the group. One of the riders, younger, with hair the same brown color as Kate's, dismounted and moved slightly away from the others. Kate recognized him immediately. Tommy Sullivan, a distant cousin who worked on a neighboring ranch. Sam positioned himself strategically among the ruins, using the mission walls as natural fortification. His movements were precise, calculated, revealing the military training that had never completely abandoned him. "I won't hand over the miss," Sam declared, rifle firm in his hands. She made her choice. The confrontation unfolded like a deadly dance among the ancient stones. Morrison and his men surrounded the mission, but Sam knew every shadow, every hiding place the location offered. When night finally fell, it was Tommy who broke the impasse. "Jake," he said, his voice carrying surprising authority. "Let's go back. The colonel said to bring her if we found her easily. This isn't being easy." During the discussion that followed, Tommy approached furtively to the wall where Kate was hiding. "Cousin," he whispered, "there's a trail on the north side they don't know. When I give the signal, run." Why was Tommy helping her? What family bonds were stronger than obedience to Uncle Colonel? When the riders finally departed, leaving promises of return, Kate and Sam understood that their days of peace had ended. In the dawn's quietude, while preparing their few belongings for flight, Sam finally said the words that had been dancing between them for weeks. "Catherine," he began, then stopped, as if the words were wild horses that refused to be tamed. "I know," she responded simply, touching his calloused hand. "Me too." Where would they go now that not even the sacred ruins offered protection? The decision to depart for Sonoma Valley, California, was born in a whispered conversation at the foot of the abandoned altar, while the stars witnessed promises that transcended words. Sam knew the region from war times when he had accompanied regiments heading to Pacific ports. "Good land for starting over," he said, tracing the route on an improvised map on the beaten earth. Far enough to forget, fertile enough to dream. The 3-month journey that began in August proved longer and more tortuous than they imagined. They followed the route through Santa Fe to avoid the main trails where Morrison's pursuit could reach them, traveling at dawn and resting during the day's heat like Bedouins of the American desert. In Santa Fe, a city of adobe and wood that smelled of pinyon and spices, Kate experienced for the first time the sweet taste of independence. While Sam worked as a blacksmith in a workshop near the main plaza, she sewed for Mexican families, who welcomed her without questions, paying her with silver coins that tinkled like music in her fingers. "Senora Catalina," the women called her, transforming her name into a soft melody that rolled on tongues like prayer. There she wasn't the rebellious daughter of Colonel Sullivan, but simply a young woman building her own story. It was in Santa Fe, also, where they faced the first real test of their union. A group of cavalry soldiers arrived in the city looking for Samuel Mackenzie, accused of desertion, a false accusation planted by enemies of Three Rivers who wanted to see him far from the region. "You can leave alone," Sam said one September night while they watched the crescent moon through the window of the small room they rented. "You don't need to carry my problems." Kate looked at him with a firmness that surprised them both. "My problems are your problems now," she declared, "just as your dreams are my dreams." They fled Santa Fe in a foggy dawn, following merchant trails that wound between pine-covered mountains. Kate had learned to ride like a man, with legs on each side of the horse, wearing pants she had bought from a Mexican boy. The freedom of movement this provided her was intoxicating. For the first time, she felt truly owner of her own steps. The landscape gradually changed as they advanced westward. Arizona's arid desert gave way to Colorado's temperate forests, then to California's golden plains. And with each mile traveled, Kate felt herself transforming, like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon woven with threads of courage and determination. When they finally sighted the first vineyards of Sonoma Valley in October 1883, it was harvest season. The vines laden with purple and golden grapes extended to the horizon like royal carpet, and the air perfumed with fermentation aromas promised abundance after so much time of scarcity. "It's here," Sam said, stopping the horse on an elevation that dominated the valley. "It's here we'll build our new life." But would it be possible to completely erase the tracks of the past, or would it follow them even to that golden paradise? 6 years later, spring 1889. Sonoma Valley awakened with the song of birds nesting among the flowering vines, and Catherine Mackenzie, for she had adopted her husband's surname in a simple ceremony officiated by a Methodist pastor, smiled, seeing the children playing in the apple orchard she herself had planted. Mary, 5 years old, had her mother's brown hair and the silent determination Kate recognized in herself. Thomas, 3 years old, would run after butterflies all day if he could, his crystalline laughter echoing among the fruit trees. And little James, barely 1 year old, crawled through the green grass with the insatiable curiosity Sam said he had inherited from his mother. The Valley of Hope Farm, a name Kate had chosen on a sleepless night when memories of Arizona visited her like inconvenient ghosts, stretched across 160 acres conquered under the Homestead Act. Every inch of that land had represented work, sweat, nights when they slept embraced sharing the warmth of a single blanket. Sam had become known in the region as a breeder of exceptionally quality horses. His hands, which once wielded rifles on battlefields, now danced over the silky coats of colts, taming them with infinite patience. The secret, he explained to neighbors who came to learn his techniques, is to respect the animal's spirit. You don't break a horse, you make friends with it. Kate, in turn, had developed a prosperous herbal medicine business, taking advantage of knowledge she had absorbed from her Irish mother and the Mexican women of Santa Fe. Her medicinal garden was famous throughout the county. Lavender to calm nerves, echinacea to strengthen the body, chamomile to lull restless children to sleep. But what made her most proud was the correspondence she maintained with other women in situations similar to her past. Letters arrived weekly from all over the American West, written by young women who had heard of the woman from Sonoma Valley who chose her own destiny. Kate responded to each one carefully, offering practical advice and, more importantly, hope. "You're creating a network," Sam observed one afternoon, finding her on the porch writing a response to a young woman from Oregon. "A web of women helping each other." Kate smiled, resting her pen in the ink. "Mom always said women were like wildflowers," she reflected, individually beautiful but together capable of coloring an entire field. Life in the valley had given them stability, modest prosperity, healthy children, and community respect. But sometimes, in moments of silence between work and sleep, Kate felt an indefinite restlessness, as if part of her story remained unfinished. It was as if the past were a shadow following them, always a few steps behind, never completely lost from sight. And on a spring morning that promised to be like all others, that shadow would finally catch up with them. What ghosts from Arizona would come to disturb the peace conquered with so much effort? Spring 1889 brought with it more than flowers and promises of good harvest. It also brought a letter sealed with red wax, delivered by a somber rider who refused to wait for a response. Kate recognized the seal before even opening the envelope, the intertwined initials CB, Cornelius Blackwood. "Dear Mrs. Mackenzie," the letter said in angular handwriting that seemed to scratch the paper. "After 6 years of patient searching, I discovered your location through methods you might prefer not to know. What was promised to me remains unfinished. I will be at your property on the next full moon to collect what is owed to me." Sam read the missive over Kate's shoulder, and she felt his muscles tense like tempered steel. "How did he find us?" Kate asked, her voice firmer than expected. "Private detective, probably," Sam responded, already calculating defenses. "Blackwood lost fortune when silver prices plummeted. Desperate men do desperate things." The fortnight that followed transformed the peaceful valley into a field of silent preparation. Sam spoke discreetly with neighbors, men who had learned to respect the Mackenzie couple through years of honest work and mutual help. Jacob Möller, a German who raised sheep on the neighboring property, had been a Prussian soldier. Old Pietro, an Italian immigrant who owned the general store, knew every trail and every hiding place in the valley. "Nobody bothers our Catalina," Pietro declared, cleaning a shotgun that seemed to have seen the Republic's first days. Kate dedicated herself to the children with redoubled intensity, as if wanting to engrave in memory every laugh of Thomas, every new word from Mary, every clumsy movement of James. At night, when the children slept, she and Sam talked in whispers about plans and contingencies. "If something happens to me," Sam began one of those nights. "Nothing's going to happen," Kate cut him off, the firmness in her voice surprising them both. "I ran once before. This time I fight." May's full moon rose large and silver over the vineyards, illuminating 3 riders advancing down the farm's main road. Blackwood came in front, older and thinner than Kate remembered, but with the same cold cruelty in his small eyes. 2 men flanked him, professional gunmen by their calculating looks and well-maintained weapons. "Catherine Sullivan," Blackwood called, stopping 20 meters from the house. Or would it be Mackenzie? Names change, but debts remain. Kate came out to the porch, Sam beside her, rifle discreet but visible. From the darkness around the property, she knew other eyes were watching, other weapons waiting. "My name is Catherine Mackenzie," she responded, her voice carrying the authority of 6 years of freedom. "And I owe nothing to you, sir. Your hand in marriage was promised." "An agreement between gentlemen. My father had no right to negotiate my life," Kate replied, "and you had no right to accept it." It was then that the shadows moved. Jacob Mueller emerged from the vineyards on the left, Pietro from the right, other neighbors from strategic points around the property. In a few minutes, Blackwood and his men were surrounded by a dozen barrels pointed in their direction. "Welcome to Sonoma Valley," said a new voice, firm and official. The county sheriff approached on horseback, badge shining in the moonlight. "We received some interesting telegrams about you coming from Arizona." Blackwood's expression changed when he understood that the ambush had been turned against him. The sheriff unfolded an official paper. "Cornelius Blackwood, you're under arrest for extortion, threats, and suspicion of homicide in the case of Abigail Blackwood." While handcuffs were placed on wrists that had once wielded whips against defenseless workers, Kate felt an unknown weight leave her shoulders. It wasn't just victory over Blackwood. It was the certainty that she had found not just a home, but a community willing to defend her. What would complete freedom taste like without shadows of the past whispering threats? Summer arrived in Sonoma Valley with unusual softness, as if even nature celebrated victory over the shadows of the past. Kate dedicated mornings to the medicinal garden, where herbs grew exuberantly under her patient care, and afternoons to the children, who played among the vines like small golden elves. It was on one of those sunny afternoons that the second letter arrived that would change everything, this time brought by regular mail, without mysteries or threats. The seal was familiar, Golden Eagle printed in blue wax. Kate immediately recognized the origin, Golden Eagle Ranch, Arizona. With slightly trembling hands, she opened the envelope. The handwriting was Tommy Sullivan's, her cousin, but the words carried the weight of news she had refused to imagine. "Dear Cousin Catherine, it is with sorrow that I write to inform you of the passing of our uncle Thaddeus, which occurred this past March. A sudden fever took him in a few days. In his will, he left the entire ranch to you, his only daughter and legitimate heir, according to his words. The lawyers in Tucson are awaiting your contact." Kate let the letter slip through her fingers like a dry leaf, sitting heavily in the wicker chair on the porch. Colonel Sullivan was dead, the man who had dominated her childhood with an iron fist, who had tried to sell her freedom for money, had departed, leaving her everything that had once been prison. Sam found her thus when he returned from the pasture, looking toward the horizon, as if she could see through the mountains to Arizona's arid lands. "What happened?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Kate handed him the letter without words. Sam read silently, then sat beside her, offering the comfort of proximity without pressing for words. "You're thinking of going back," he said finally. "It wasn't a question. Not to stay," Kate responded slowly, "but maybe to make peace, to see if I can transform that place into something my mother would approve of." In the weeks that followed, Kate plunged into intense correspondence with Tucson lawyers, discovering the extent of the inheritance. The ranch was worth more than she had imagined. The neighboring lands where Blackwood mined silver were now part of the property, since the exploitation contract had died with his imprisonment. "You could sell everything," Sam suggested one night while they calculated values by candlelight. "The money would be enough to expand our property here, guarantee education for the children." Kate nodded, but a different idea began forming in her mind, like a seed planted in fertile soil. "Or I could transform it into something useful," she murmured. "A place for women who need a new beginning, like I needed once." Sam raised his eyes from the papers, intrigued. "A kind of refuge?" "More than that," Kate said, excitement growing in her voice. "A farm where women can learn trades, care for children safely, find strength to start over. I could use the mining money to sustain it." The idea took shape in the nightly conversations that followed. Kate imagined clean dormitories, where single mothers could raise children without judgment, workshops where young women fled from forced marriages could learn sewing, cooking, accounting, a place where no woman would need to feel prisoner of circumstances she hadn't chosen. It would be like planting a seed of hope in that desert, she reflected. But would it be possible to transform a place of so much personal suffering into a sanctuary of freedom? And what decision would be best for her family? Autumn painted the vineyards gold and red, creating a symphony of colors that Kate observed from the kitchen window while preparing preserves for winter. Letters came and went between California and Arizona, like carrier pigeons carrying pieces of destiny. Tommy Sullivan had become temporary administrator of the Golden Eagle Ranch, and his descriptions of the property revealed surprising changes. Without the colonel's authoritarian hand, Mexican workers had transformed parts of the land into productive gardens. Maria, the former housekeeper, kept the main house clean and airy, as if expecting the young mistress's return. "She asks about you every day," Tommy wrote. "She says the house misses your laughter." That phrase touched Kate more deeply than she had expected. Maria had been a substitute mother, silent consoler, the only person who understood her suffering without needing words. Knowing she still remembered, still waited, warmed something cold inside Kate's chest. Sam found her one morning in the orchard, sitting under the apple tree she had planted in the first year, watching Mary play with straw dolls she herself had made. "You're decided, aren't you?" he asked, sitting on the grass beside her. Kate nodded slowly. "But not the way you imagine," she said. "I want to transform the ranch into the women's refuge, but our home is here. Our life is here." "How?" "Tommy can administer the project. We can hire women from the region to teach trades, provide structure. I supervise by correspondence, visit twice a year, enough to ensure it works, but not enough to keep me away from you." It was an ambitious plan, and Sam remained silent for long minutes, contemplating the implications. "It will be expensive," he observed finally. "Silver mining is yielding well now that there's no excessive exploitation," Kate responded. "And I'm thinking of selling some less productive land lots to finance construction of new buildings. And if it doesn't work?" Kate smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. "Then at least I tried, and the land will still be there, helping whoever needs a new beginning." The conversation with the children happened that night around the fireplace, where flames danced like golden spirits. Mary, precocious at 5, asked the question Kate feared. "Mommy, are you going away?" "Never, my love," Kate responded, pulling her daughter onto her lap. "Sometimes Mommy might need to travel to help other people, but I'll always come home. To you." Thomas, still too young to fully understand, only wanted to know if he could go along to see the Arizona horses. James, in his father's lap, played with Sam's shirt buttons, oblivious to adult plan complexities. "It will be an adventure," Mary declared with children's serious wisdom. "Like in the stories you tell about Grandma Mary." That night, lying beside Sam in the bed they had shared for 6 years, Kate felt the peace of decision made. She would no longer flee from the past. She would transform it. She wouldn't deny her origins. She would use them to help other women find their own paths. "Are you sure?" Sam asked in the darkness. "More sure than I've ever been of anything," she responded, intertwining her fingers with his. But how would it be to return to the place where everything began, and what memories would be waiting for her in Arizona's red lands? Spring 1890 brought Kate's first trip to Arizona since her escape 7 years before. Sam insisted on accompanying her, leaving the children in the care of the German neighbor, Frau Müller, who would treat them like temporary grandchildren while the parents were away. 2 weeks, Kate promised when saying goodbye to Mary, who cried clinging to her mother's skirt. "When we return, we'll bring beautiful gifts from the desert." The train journey to Tucson was a revelation in itself. Kate remembered only the dusty and dangerous trails they had traveled during the escape, but now railroads cut across the continent, like veins of progress. From the car windows, she watched the landscape gradually transform from California's green vineyards to Arizona's rocky mountains. "Are you nervous?" Sam asked, noticing how she twisted her hands in her lap. "Anxious," Kate corrected. "It's different." Tommy waited for them at the Tucson station with a covered wagon and a smile that mixed joy with nervousness. At 30, he had become a serious, responsible man, very different from the young cowboy who had helped her escape. "Cousin Catalina," he said, using the name he had learned to like in Santa Fe. "Welcome back." The journey to the ranch lasted a full day. On roads now well marked and relatively safe, Kate observed every familiar landmark: the eagle-shaped rock formation that had given the ranch its name, the dry river where she used to play as a child, the violet mountains that limited the horizon like ancestral guardians. But it was upon sighting the main house, built in adobe and wood in the style her father had brought from the south, that Kate felt her heart squeeze. There was her childhood, preserved in every brick, every beam, every shadow of the porch where she had learned to embroider under her mother's watchful gaze. Maria appeared at the door before the wagon even stopped completely. Older, more bent, but with the same warm smile that had warmed the difficult days of Kate's youth. The two women embraced in silence, tears speaking more than any words. "My child," Maria whispered in Spanish, How you've grown. How strong you've become. The house had changed subtly. Without the Colonel's dominating presence, the room seemed brighter, more airy. Maria had replaced the heavy dark curtains with lighter fabrics, allowing desert light to enter abundantly. The walls, once decorated only with portraits of Confederate generals, now also displayed Mexican embroidery and photographs of the Sullivan family in happier times. "She kept your room exactly as it was," Tommy explained, leading Kate through the familiar corridor. Upon opening the door, Kate felt time fold upon itself. There was the iron bed with blue quilt, where she had dreamed of freedom, the desk where she had written letters never sent to her dead mother, the window from where she had watched cowboys and envied their mobility. But now, as an adult woman, mother, landowner, Kate saw the room with different eyes. It was no longer prison, it was starting point. The place where the courage was born that led her to Sam, to freedom, to the full life she had built in California. "I'm going to transform this into an office," she said, surprising herself with the firmness of the decision. "From here I'll coordinate the refuge." What other ghosts and revelations awaited in the forgotten corners of the property that now belonged to her completely? On the third day at the ranch, while Kate and Sam walked through the pastures where cattle grazed peacefully under the morning sun, Maria approached them, carrying a small carved wooden box that Kate had never seen. "Miss Catalina," said the housekeeper, her voice loaded with a weight that spoke of secrets kept for years. "There's something the Colonel made me swear I would only give you after his death." Kate accepted the box with trembling hands, recognizing the delicate marquetry work. Clearly Irish, probably made by the maternal grandfather, who had died before her birth. Inside, wrapped in silk, yellowed by time, she found letters tied with blue ribbon and a photograph that made her sigh. The photograph showed her parents in their youth, before war and hardships had hardened the Colonel's features. Thaddeus Sullivan was smiling. Kate barely remembered seeing him smile, with a protective arm around Mary, who held a baby in her lap. Kate needed a moment to understand. The baby was herself. "He kept this all these years?" she asked, her voice choked. "Every night," Maria confirmed. "Before sleeping, he looked at this photograph. After you escaped, I heard him crying in the study." The letters proved even more surprising. They were missives the Colonel had written to Kate but never sent, a unilateral correspondence that began a few days after her escape. "My dear Catherine," said the first letter, dated a week after the escape, "I know you don't understand the reasons for my decisions. Perhaps you're too young to understand that a father sometimes needs to choose between what he wants for a daughter and what he believes necessary for her survival. The marriage to Blackwood wasn't my desire, but necessity. The ranch's debts. But that doesn't matter now. You made your choice, and perhaps with time I'll learn to respect it." Other letters followed throughout the years, documenting the gradual transformation of a hard man into a repentant father. They spoke of workers he had begun treating better, thinking about what Catherine would approve, of improvements he had made to the property for the day when she wants to know it again, of nights when he walked through her room, feeling the rose perfume her mother used and that you inherited. The last letter, written shortly before death, was the most revealing. "Catherine, my dear daughter, if you're reading this, it means I departed without having the courage to send you a single one of these letters. I was a coward, as I was a coward when I tried to control your life instead of trusting your strength. Your mother told me before dying that you had a spirit too wild to be tamed. I should have listened. The ranch is yours by right, but more than that, it's my way of asking forgiveness. Transform it into something that reflects the generous heart you inherited from Mary. Be free, my daughter. Be happy. Be everything I didn't have the courage to let you be." Kate cried then, tears falling on the yellowed pages like rain on parched earth. They weren't tears of sadness, but of final liberation. The man she had painted as an inflexible tyrant in her memories revealed himself to be just an imperfect father, terrified of losing the only thing that remained of his beloved wife. Sam embraced her in silence, understanding that those tears washed away the last sorrows Kate carried without knowing. Maria watched from the porch, smiling through her own tears. "Now you're truly free," Sam murmured. "Now," Kate agreed, "I can transform this place into something beautiful." What destiny awaited the Golden Eagle Ranch in the hands of one who knew intimately both pain and hope? About 2 years later, autumn 1892, the porch of the Golden Eagle Ranch's main house had transformed into a hanging garden where Irish roses, planted in memory of Mary Sullivan, bloomed alongside Mexican jasmine that Maria tended with maternal care. Kate rocked slowly in the wicker chair Sam had built especially for her visits, watching the women working in the property's gardens. The Eagle's Refuge, as it had become known in the region, now housed 15 women and 23 children. There were new dormitories built at the back of the property, a school where children learned to read and write regardless of gender, workshops for sewing, cooking, and even a small printing press where they produced a monthly newspaper that circulated throughout the territory. Sarah, a young widow from El Paso, who had arrived with 3 children and not a cent, now managed the bakery that supplied bread for the entire region. Mercedes, escaped from an arranged marriage in Sonora, taught Mexican embroidery to the other women, creating pieces sold as far as San Francisco. Each brought her own story of pain transformed into strength, desperation transformed into hope. "Señora Catalina," Mercedes said, approaching the porch with an envelope in her hands. A letter arrived from California. Kate immediately recognized the careful handwriting of Mary, her daughter now 8 years old, who wrote faithfully every week. The letters were treasures Kate kept religiously, windows into the life that continued flourishing in Sonoma Valley. "Dear Mommy," the current letter said, "Daddy said you'll come home next week. Thomas caught a huge fish in the creek and wants to show it to you before it rots." His words, not mine. "James already walks alone and said Mommy for the first time yesterday. Daddy cried, but pretended it was because of dust. The vineyards are golden like the dress you wore to the last church dance. We miss you. P.S. Frau Müller taught us to make apple strudel. It will be a surprise when you return." Kate smiled, folding the letter carefully. In a few days she would be back in the valley, with children growing too fast, with the husband who had never complained about the absences necessary to build this dream. "You're happy," Maria observed, who had appeared silently, with a tray of lemon verbena tea. "I'm complete," Kate corrected. "There's a difference." That afternoon she walked alone to the small family cemetery where the colonel lay, and beside him her mother's symbolic tomb, whose remains had stayed in Tucson Cemetery, but whose memory deserved a special place in the land she had so loved. "Father," she said, kneeling on the reddish earth where wildflowers grew abundantly, "I forgive you, and thank you." The desert wind whispered through the cacti like an ancestral response, carrying the perfume of sage and the promise of rain that always came when most needed. The next day, before departing for California, Kate planted a young oak in the center of the main house's courtyard. Tommy and Sam helped her dig the hole, while the refugee women and their children formed a circle around. "A tree for the future," Kate explained, her hands dirty with red earth, "so everyone knows it's possible to grow deep roots even after difficult times." As the wagon that would take her back to the Tucson station moved away, Kate turned one last time to look at the ranch. She saw free women working on free land, children playing without fear, flowers growing where before there were only thorns. She saw the past transformed into promise, pain transformed into healing. The Golden Eagle Ranch had found its true calling, not as prison, but as gateway to new beginnings. And Kate Sullivan Mackenzie, daughter of the desert and mother of the valley, had finally learned that true freedom wasn't just in fleeing from what imprisons us, but in transforming the very chains into bridges for those who come behind. Sometimes, the greatest courage is in climbing onto the horse and riding toward the unknown. Other times it's in returning, head held high and heart full, to transform what seemed impossible to change.